Okay, we're back in the continuation of Billy being shown how the device inside the Pleiadian ship can actually read the conscious mind and the subconscious mind, and Billy's just demonstrated that he understands it, and that she's quite surprised that he can really understand it as well as he does. And she says, yeah, we can, through this device, listen to the conscious mind and the subconscious mind of any individual that we think about. And the subconscious mind contains information about your future, because the future that you are creating for yourself is being created all the time in your subconscious mind, and your conscious mind is not aware of it. Now, that's an important point for all of us. We're always hearing how we should create our own future and take responsibility for ourselves. Well, apparently we're doing it all the time anyway without even our own awareness. That our subconscious mind is at all times creating a future. And by creating a future, what I'm meaning is that it's making plans for what it wants to do, what you want to do. Your subconscious mind is making plans for the next few days on what it wants to do, and your conscious mind is not even aware of it yet. Your conscious mind kind of gets the news later on when it's time to do something, so to speak, or whenever your conscious mind actually turns to the subconscious and tries to tune into it. But here we have a device that can tune into your subconscious mind and then read what that subconscious mind is thinking of doing in the future. Now, how far ahead in this future, I don't know. But here, the device is reading Hans's mind, because in 2 days' time, Hans was planning on calling Billy. And on the screen, suddenly they see Hans picking up the telephone to call Billy to arrange a meeting to come over and talk about doing these lectures and so forth. So Billy's very surprised that on the screen he can actually see the future, see Hans doing something in the future, and all this is being read through Hans's subconscious. He doesn't even know yet that in 2 days he's going to suddenly decide to call Billy to do this. But his subconscious mind, 2 days previous to that event, has already decided that he wants to do it. Well, Billy's a little surprised, says, gee, with this device you guys can know pretty much anything. And she says, yeah, we can. We have to be very careful so we don't misuse this knowledge, but it gives us the ability to pretty much look into the thoughts, feelings, and future about anyone that we want to. And Billy says, well, could I give it a try? And she says, sure, go ahead. You seem to understand the symbols pretty well. What do you want to do? So he puts his he puts his hand on the world ball, he called it in the notes. It's called a world ball. I don't know if it looked like the earth or just a round ball. And she says, well, think about whoever you want to see on the screen. And he does. And he says, well, the person I'm going to see on here, he says, I'm going to be thinking about General Francisco Franco of Spain. And he begins to think about that. And she says, well, okay, now this button right here next to the ball, push the button. And he pushes this button, or depresses this little whatever it is there. And on the screen suddenly, he's seeing these symbols which represent the subconscious mind of Francisco Franco. And then he switches something, and you can see the conscious mind of Francisco. And Billy's reading the symbols which depict the information from Franco's conscious mind, and he says, wow, look at this. This fella is scared to death. I mean, he's really in fear. What's he afraid of? And he reads some more symbols that are moving across the screen, and he says, I understand now. This poor devil is afraid of dying. He's afraid to death. He's going to die. Matter of fact, he's terrified. He's trembling. And if any of you will remember back in that time period, that General Francisco Franco was dying at that time, and ultimately did die about a month after that. Well, Billy switches it over to the subconscious, and he's kind of surprised. And he says, well, look, this is entirely different. The subconscious mind is not afraid. The subconscious mind is not terrified at all. And he kind of stops for a second. He says, I don't get it. The conscious mind is terrified, afraid of death, and the subconscious mind is very peaceful. What's going on? And Semjase says, well, that's very simple. The subconscious mind is directly connected to creation. And the subconscious mind knows that death is no terror at all. And Billy kind of has a realization. He says, oh, of course, I understand. The subconscious mind, which is directly hooked to your spiritual abilities, which is directly hooked to creation all the time, is aware that death is no great horror, that it's simply a step into a new evolution, you might call it. It's the continuation of an evolution. It's just a step forward in your growth. So it wouldn't be terrified at all. But his subconscious mind, he says, look in here, I see this, that the subconscious mind knows that he's going to have a heart attack soon. And he starts to give the date, and Semjase stops him. She says, don't say the date out loud, because we don't want it in your notes. I don't want you to say the date out loud. And he says, why? And she says, well, we don't call the dates out on events like this, future dates on people, because they don't really want to affect events. They don't want it in his notes where people would be reading about it. Now, a heart attack probably wouldn't be something that would have any effect anyway, but it's a general trend or general way of doing things with them, that they don't reveal things about the future exactly because they don't want to have effect on them. They apparently have got to a point technically where they can see the future events of people and of nations and of planets, but they don't like to take responsibility for events happening. So they're very careful, morally careful, about not changing any of those events by actually, putting information out about them, which would cause people to react differently than they normally would. So Billy doesn't call the date out, but right after the contact he goes home and he writes this letter down. It's October 20th, and he writes a letter down with the date and everything in it and sends it to Hans and tells Hans not to open the letter till November 20th, which Hans does. He gets the letter, he receives the letter and opens it up, and in it is an explanation all about this device and the contact that Billy has just had and all the information about Franco, and that he will die on November 20th. And so they were able to see the date actually exactly right on the machine, and they have this device then that reads our subconscious. Okay, and a couple of tapes back I mentioned that Semjase was explaining to Billy about the occurrences in the Bermuda Triangle. And she explained exactly what was causing this, that it was the radiation from a couple of very large suns that were putting a small rip in time in certain areas on the Earth. And because of that, ships would disappear and slip off into different time realms. Billy had more questions about that later on, and she says, well, we will have an opportunity very soon that we will be able to show you exactly how that works. Well, apparently they had reason to go into another dimension, and after they explained to Billy exactly what dimensions are at one particular time, an opportunity did come up for him to be shown exactly what's in the Bermuda Triangle dimensions door. So she picked Billy up, and she was in her ship, and she explained to them that to remember the drawing that she had made for him that showed the cyclone-shaped swirl, which is the shape of what a dimensions door actually looks like and how they get into it. And they flew into the area where the Bermuda Triangle is, and they proceeded to head into the dimensions door. She says they're not going to be going in exactly to the same dimension where these people slip off into. Normally when you go through a dimensions door without any equipment or apparatus to protect you, then you would just slide right into a future Earth situation. But that's not exactly where they were going to go. By the way, the one that the ships and people and so forth have slipped into seems to be far in the Earth future, someplace we don't know exactly how far. But they're not going into that particular dimensions frame. They're going to go in controlled more with instruments and the radiation shields that protect the ship. So they're going into a different, it's the same dimension door, but they seem to have control of where they go. And they're going into a certain area where there's been an accident where there are 3 Earths all in one dimension. Now here we only have one Earth in our dimension that we live in, so it'd be a little unusual to go into a dimension where there are 3 Earths. There is a future Earth, 470 years in our future, and there is a primitive or prehistoric Earth, and then there's one existing in the very, very primitive stages, just in the gas ball sort of era, I guess you'd call it. So they proceed to go into the dimension, and Billy's looking on the screens inside of the ship, and up ahead of him, proceed to go into the dimension, and Billy's looking on the screens inside of the ship, and up ahead of him, he sees exactly what Semjase had drawn for him, this dimensions door that looks like a swirling cyclone somehow. Looks like kind of like what a tornado would look like if you were flying right into the funnel of it. And as he's looking into the dimensions door, he sees the other dimension up in front as he's looking. And if he turns around and looks just behind him at the back of the ship, he would see the presence present-day Earth. So at one particular point you would see both, the dimension that we are in and the dimension that he would fly into. They fly on into that, and as they get inside, she's explaining to him about the 3 different Earths that are present in there. And he notices that Ptah's great spacer ship is already in there. And she explains to Billy that yes, that another extraterrestrial race that has space travel also, one of their ships had flown into this particular dimension, but somehow was having equipment problems or did not have the right equipment. It couldn't get back out, and they were going to go in and try to get him out of there. And while they were there, they invited Billy to go along so he could see this. So they did. They're in there, and she's explaining the different planets and what they look like. And she flies into the area where the primitive Earth is. Well, Billy's getting kind of excited because she's saying primitive, and he's thinking, oh yeah, do they have these like prehistoric animals, saurians and so forth on there? And she says, yes, as a matter of fact, we knew that you'd be excited about that, so we're going to allow you the opportunity to actually put on some sort of protective suit that they had made, and Billy would be able to get out and see these primitive animals and take pictures of them. Earlier on a tape I had mentioned that when Billy was taking the great spacer trip, when he traveled with them to different planets, that they went by a planet that had very large prehistoric animals on it, and he wanted to get out and take a picture of the animals there. And I suggested, I thought maybe he did, but I remember he did not. It was on this particular trip into the Bermuda Triangle's dimension where they actually provided him with a suit. Well, they hook up with Ptah's ship, and Billy once again gets to talk to Ptah for a little bit, and he's telling him, yeah, we have brought a couple of suits that Ptah will go out on the primitive planet with Billy and just see the animals, and Billy's going to get a chance to take pictures and so forth, which he does. He gets a few pictures of different reptilian creatures and saurian birds, and he even gets a picture, he has Semjase take a picture of him and Ptah together on the planet. So after they've done that, there's another Earth there also, and this is a future Earth. And Billy's saying, you mean the planet Earth actually has a future, huh? He says, yeah, this is a future Earth that exists 470 years in our future. At this particular time, the Earth people have already developed stations and cities on the moon and other planets. And she says, we'll go visit the moon now. And she flies up to the moon, and Billy can see there are small cities and settlements, and they spend some time different areas on the moon, and he takes a few pictures. And he's kind of surprised that the Earth people have actually developed that far. And she says, yes, almost 500 years has passed, and by now they've had the capabilities of designing ships similar to our Beamships, and they have interplanetary travel now. She's also, we have to be very careful that even though the Earth people are far more peaceful than they used to be, they're very aggressive, and that if her ship was to be noticed, certainly that they would probably try to force her to land, and that'd be in a very uncomfortable position for her. So she was being careful not to be detected at any time by the, the current Earth people there. After they go around the moon, they actually fly down to the planet Earth, and they spend, actually it says about 7 hours, they fly around the current future Earth there, and Billy's taking pictures and seeing different sections on the Earth, and she's showing him all around about what the future of Earth is going to look like, but there's no comments in the contact notes really about that, so we don't get any clues as to what may particularly lie in our future there. They fly back to the Great Spacer and hook up there once again, and while they're waiting for Ptah, Billy has a few questions. And one is about the lifespan. And he had remembered that Semjase had told him that the lifespan of the Pleiadians was averaging around 1,000 years. And would there be any way possible that current-day Earth people could achieve something like that? And she said, yes, there is, not only through medical breakthroughs and technology and so forth, but there are also other ways to control the lifespan. She says that our ancestors who lived here on Earth long ago, our early ancestors who had come from different planets, understood more about that. They also understood a lot more about creation and how the energy of creation can be used by spirit forms like ourselves to do many different things. And lifespan was one of the things that was possible. She says that through an understanding of how creation works, and through an understanding that we have a spirit and how to use the spiritual powers, that a person who is knowledgeable in the spiritual laws can actually control their lifespan somewhat. What happens is, she says, when you think in accordance with the natural and creational laws, you create some sort of special high-frequency radiation that oscillates at a certain way, so it creates some immense force. And this is generated by your spirit. And this force that you generate yourself by the way that you think influences the cells of your body, and you live a lot longer. That our early ancestors here, living back previous to 10,000 years